This high school girl is stepping into a special old bookstore. She wants to buy high school textbooks. Peter put away his gloomy face and smiled happily with the first customer. I sell all kinds of books except the ones I don't sell. The girl wants to buy old textbooks. I have all kinds from 96 to 2020. The girl chose the newest one to buy for her sister. Peter looked at the uniform and guessed she was a high school student. The name tag, Leona, proved she was in her final year. Leona was surprised when Peter pulled out a stack of new books. She only needed old books because she didn't have enough money. I don't need these anymore, so I'll give them to you, he said. If she didn't dare to accept because these were new books, he would peel off the seal. That way, this pile of books became old now. Peter did all this because he recognized Leona's love for her sister. As an old man, Peter advised her to treat her sister well while she could. Yona hesitated, not knowing whether to call him uncle or sir. Peter said just call him sir for comfort. Yona wondered if Peter had ever regretted anything. Of course he did. The longer he lived, the more he regretted. But he couldn't do anything else because that was the only way for him and his daughter to live. Even though Yona didn't understand what a 60-year-old old man was saying, he just advised her to treat her sister well. And above all, tell her to go back soon when she was about to assassinate him. I won't kill you if you go back, Peter said. Leona was startled when she was discovered. People say the older the ginger, the spicier it is. Peter lived here long enough to know all the high schools here. But to confirm, he deliberately asked her to study in the final year of that high school, but the truth is that the school was only built 2 years ago. Yona realized she was manipulated by Peter too late, but it was also because he had lived his whole life as a legendary assassin, so those disguise tricks were hard to fool. Especially trying to hide the smell of the knife with perfume bought on Shopee. Yona was furious and rushed up because she had been caught from the beginning. If so, she didn't need to be merciful. Suddenly she stopped. Clearly she had a weapon, but felt like just taking one more step would go down the golden stream. The pressure emanating from Peter made Yona back off a few steps. But he didn't do anything as he said. Gave her the stack of books because he knew what Yona said about her sister was true. Living 50 years as an assassin was enough for him to recognize the authenticity in the eyes of others. Peter was sure she also came from the orphanage glory like him. This old script of theirs was familiar as the palm of his hand. But it seemed Yona was a new soldier who hadn't been trained yet, because in their organization if the volunteer service failed, they would switch to Plan B. Withdraw. Peter suddenly rushed to strangle Yona. She thought she was about to die at his hands, then realized there were 2 other guys with hot goods rushing in. They didn't hesitate to fire continuously at them but didn't hit any. Luckily Peter saved Yona. Plan B was to kill the volunteer like her. Yona didn't care about Plan B because now Peter was injured by the bullet. Not letting them escape, the 2 intruders continued to fire. Peter pulled out the gun he always kept for himself, but Yona was taken hostage so he couldn't fire. While Peter was hesitating, one of them rushed up and punched him straight in the face like a thunderbolt. He punched and then doubted that an old man with weak legs and arms like this was the legendary assassin Peter? Oh God, I'm sorry, Senior. A bald man in a vest came in. He had the nickname of the 8-legged man of the organization. Today he came to ask for Peter's life. Peter didn't care much about the words of his boss. He just wanted to know why he was being hunted by the organization he dedicated himself to. Now, as soon as Peter stepped outside, there would be thousands of guns pointed at him, all for the bounty on Peter's head, 7.6 billion won. Ironically, this was the amount of money in his account, the money Peter saved his whole life by selling his life on the battlefield. But now that money would fall into someone else's hands. Thinking of getting 7.6 billion won made him laugh uncontrollably. Senior, please die in my hands. As soon as he finished speaking, a henchman continued to beat Peter, knocking him out of the alley. It seemed he had been defeated. They were excited on their way here to fight with the legendary Peter, but everything was done with just a few punches. The 8-legged man approached to examine. Peter smirked. Here's a little gift for you. Then he threw a flash bomb at him, making his face distorted, followed by an explosion that lit up the whole room. After clearing the smoke, Peter also disappeared. Then they realized they were tricked by him to get to the back door. But Peter was also seriously injured, so he couldn't have gone far. The whole gang split up to look for the 7.6 billion head. In a children's playground, Peter was breathing hard after escaping, his body full of wounds trembling. Even if he was a legendary assassin, he had to lose to old age. His whole life was wrapped up in 2 words, organization. When others were holding pencils, Peter learned how to hold a knife. When people learned how to use social media, Peter had to learn how to eavesdrop until his ears bled. When others were dating, Peter became a Russian spy living with a price tag 24/7. When others settled down and lived happily, Peter fought among a group of terrorists to survive. In short, Peter had worked with his life on the battlefield for 50 years, but everything changed when the new boss took over. He said a new era had begun and Peter was too old and not up to expectations, so they needed to get rid of him to start a new generation. After Peter left the organization, he didn't wish to live in wealth or be respected, but what was the outcome? His life was full of tragedies. They shouldn't have done that, at least with a legend like Peter. Peter didn't want to die like this and let them live happily with the money he exchanged with his blood and sweat. But even so, Peter saw his eyes heavy and fainted in the rain. At this time, at the hideout of the eight-legged man, the henchmen were angry for losing Peter. But why did the organization have to pay such a large amount of money just to hunt down an old man? Maybe that was the minimum they did to respect the one who was called a legend. Even so, money was still what everyone was after. This guy had given up his boxing champion title to come here and earn $7.6 billion by taking the life of the old man in the picture. Do you know what? That was the first picture with my face on it, a voice rang out. The two guys were startled when someone broke in. Looking at their clothes they thought it was Peter, but looking again this person was taller than the old man in the picture. I don't know either. When I woke up I was like this. He touched the healed wound on his body. They didn't know what he was mumbling but still advised him to leave. Antung took his arm, asking them to take him to the place of the eight-legged man. The two looked at each other and laughed. Oh, so you're a colleague? I don't care what you're here for, but if someone in the same industry comes here, you have to die. As soon as he finished speaking, he showed the power of the boxing champion, but his punch was blocked in mid-air by an arm of his. He remembered the moment he was beaten by him while mocking his legendary title, returning what he had done to himself with a loving handshake. The bastard, the remaining guy, rushed up with a knife but was punched before he got close to him. The puncher tried to hold the knife up to defend. Damn, who sent you here? The person who uses the knife skillfully is rank 3, those who are proficient in weapons are rank 2, and the first rank is using anything as a weapon, he said as he held the octopus skewer as a weapon. Han didn't understand what he was talking nonsense, so he rushed up with the knife. With just a flick of his hand, the octopus skewer in his hand knocked the knife out of his hand. He hadn't even realized it when he was wrapped tightly around his neck by the octopus skewer, then he was dragged around the room like a dog by him, finally landing in the hot pot that they had prepared. After being tortured for a while, he didn't even have the strength to say, "You, who are you, why?" He didn't say anything, just looked at the photo, the only photo of Peter just out of the oven while talking to Leona. That was him a few hours ago, but now Peter was at a different level. Even if 1,000 people die 1,000 times and wake up, the old Peter that you are chasing is dead, because he has rejuvenated after a dream of youth. On the car with the 4-digit license plate, the eight-legged man was angry for letting Peter slip away. They must catch him before the arrest warrant was officially issued. Moreover, Peter was also about to die of cancer, so he should help his juniors have a prosperous life, he said to Yona, who had just been beaten up. At Hoavine, he had to let him breathe for a few more days, but he was not in a hurry because he was just an ant. Back to town, both the pedestrians and Peter were amazed at his body. It was unbelievable that a 60-year-old man had rejuvenated in one night. The bullet wound that pierced his side had also disappeared, even the pain of cancer that tortured him to death was gone. Seeing that the pedestrians also looked at him with greedy eyes, Peter proved that he was not hallucinating. He really rejuvenated, although he didn't know the reason, but at least now they couldn't recognize his face. After the arrest warrant was issued, people everywhere were hunting Peter, but they would never find the old man out there. But first, he should go find some clothes for his new body. While walking, the conversation between two gangsters caught Peter's ear about a female employee who was cheated out of her salary and had a sick mother. But they didn't care, they just liked to take that money to buy Gucci clothes to follow the trend with the young people. Just show off the LV brand clothes and Rolex watch and you can sign contracts as easily as milling rice. Hey you young guys, this is a no-smoking area. Can you go outside and smoke? Peter spoke up. They looked down at him with the piggy eyes of a pig. Are you talking to me, you brat? Seeing that he didn't use honorifics, one of them slapped him on one side of his face. Don't joke like that somewhere else or you'll die for sure. Today I'm in a good mood so I'll let you go. Peter realized that he shouldn't waste time with these guys and went straight out the door. They looked at each other and laughed. Haha, the retard must be going through puberty. Peter went out the door but locked it, preventing anyone else from entering. He should end this soon to have clothes to wear. Hey, what is he going to do? Style makes the man, huh? Make the idiot then. The two of them juggled when they saw Peter fuming towards them. Peter rolled up his sleeves, ready to show them the consequences of disrespecting the elderly. This scrawny guy, the fat one who tried to touch Peter's cheek for the second time, got lightly tapped twice by him, spitting saliva and falling down. The skinny one holding a knife threatened, "Who are you? Do you know who we are?" Of course Peter didn't know them, but he knew he was holding the tweezer's knife wrong. If he threw it like that he would cut his own hand. He clenched his neck. "Who the hell said I would throw the knife, you crazy?" Of course it was because the one who wanted to stab wouldn't expose his arm like that. He rushed up but was knocked down by 2 slaps from Peter. His teacher picked up the knife and he immediately hugged his neck and screamed. Peter looked at him with a judgmental eye. "I didn't stab you, you know. If I did, you would have died 3 times already." He still didn't know who Peter was. He had made enemies and caused trouble when. But Peter didn't reveal his identity, just lightly pinched his shoulder. Anyone who knew Peter's identity would have to die. His teacher shivered as if he was about to wet his pants. Peter warned him to hold it because he didn't have pants to change his head. He was still confused and didn't understand anything when he was stripped by Peter. Now he was wearing a new suit of theirs. Peter checked the bank, all the money was gone. He had warned them not to touch his account, but they still insisted. On the way, Peter saw 2 students happy after receiving a scholarship from the Glory Club, where he came from. Actually, it was called the Glory Orphanage, run by a small religious organization. And now, after 50 years, it has become a giant conglomerate with influence in both politics and business around the world. With the name Peter was once a legend of that company, and now he himself will destroy it. In a pig slaughterhouse, a man in a vest was being hunted sitting in the middle of the room arrogantly. Because only Octopus came to catch him, but just one octopus was enough to shoot him. "Glory, what? You guys have been eating shark liver lately. If you guys keep singing the song of trust in old Peter, then you only have the way to die early," he sneered. Octopus didn't care, but the introduction was over. Now it was time to send him to the dust. The reason he sat in the chair and taunted like that was because he had prepared hot goods for Octopus. For tall, black, smelly mercenaries from a private military company surrounded him. He was confident that he could easily kill Octopus, a new soldier who wasn't even one of the 12 apostles of the glory. All 4 rushed to beat Octopus. But just a few minutes later, he had to shiver in fear when he witnessed the scene in front of him. A normal person couldn't do that. Octopus calmly said, "Looking at the grand opening like that, but this is more bland than I thought." At that time, he was wrapping around a mercenary like a spinning octopus, his head twisted 180 degrees backwards like a horror movie. Get away from me," he screamed madly when the flexible body and the terrifying face rushed towards him. After finishing the job, Octopus returned to his garden. The 2 henchmen were killed and no clues were found because the camera was broken. The weapon was not found. He could only think of one person, that was Peter, but he didn't understand how the old man 60 years old with serious injuries could still live well and take revenge. Meanwhile, what he worried about was the reward for Peter was about to drop. He had to get Peter's head before it lost value. As for Yona, she had to constantly search for Peter's whereabouts, but in her head she only thought of the kind old man who gave her a whole bunch of new books. As soon as he opened the door and stepped in, Octopus was surprised, because today was not a day to open, but there was a guest who came in his restaurant had to make a reservation in advance to eat. "I didn't book a table in advance, but I have a debt to pay," Peter said while enjoying the dishes on the table. Octopus tilted his head. He remembered that he never forced anyone to pay the bill. "That's right," Peter said, "but my bill is a bit big, about 7.6 billion or something." Hearing him say that, his friendly face suddenly stretched out coldly like a block of ice, locking the door. Hearing 7.6 billion, Octopus guessed that he was related to Peter, but whether he was a friend or an enemy, he couldn't survive leaving here. But in his head, Octopus was still wondering how the person in front of him knew about Peter. He was sure he was not a member of the organization, but he couldn't guess what he was thinking. What is the relationship with Peter, son or disciple? But Peter always lived alone. The waiter brought the weapon. He gave him 2 choices. One was to tell the whereabouts of Peter and survive to go home. 2 was to resist and die with a bullet stuck in his head. Peter still calmly enjoyed the food, making Octopus impatient. Then he calmly said, "Or how about this? I am Peter." "Hello." Octopus had 8 legs, but he couldn't understand what Peter was saying. Peter sighed. "Still young, but his ears were more deaf than an old man of 60 like me. I killed the 2 guys." Octopus overthinking. He thought that old Peter did it, but if the person in front of him was right, then it was not old Peter. Then why did this young man target him? Peter was still sitting casually eating dinner. Since he was 60, this was the first time he got to eat such fancy food. "This student, this is a real gun, so tell the truth. What is your relationship with Peter?" "Want to know?" Peter asked. "I want to know." Octopus answered. Then you have to kill me first, Peter said while picking up another piece of fried octopus. Octopus ordered his subordinates, just keep him breathing to interrogate him. The younger brother didn't have time to pull the trigger when he was stabbed through the throat by a chopstick and died instantly. Leona was startled and amazed, unable to believe that a chopstick could pierce through a person's vital spot in a second. She looked over at Peter, who was taking a new chopstick. He looked like he was her age, but definitely at a different level. Even no one in the country had the ability to kill people with chopsticks. Wow, Octopus tilted his head and praised. He liked him already. As he spoke, he walked towards Peter, although he kept inviting him to join his gang, but his right arm reached behind his pants, then he pulled out a gun and fired continuously. Peter tilted the table to block a few bullets. After firing for a while, he sneered, I guess you're still just a kid, and kids like to fantasize a lot. But you can't block bullets with a table like that. A red liquid flowed out of the table. He walked step by step towards the table. I'll give you another chance to tell me where Peter is. It's a pity if you die now. Saying one thing and doing another, he rushed behind the table with a gun in his hand, but immediately realized he was fooled. There was no one behind the table, only bottles of chili oil spilled, so it wasn't blood. Octopus turned around to look for Peter, but he was nowhere to be found. Where did he go? He's not a ghost that can disappear. Suddenly he remembered that he hadn't checked the top. As soon as he looked up, he met Peter's affectionate eyes. Before he could react, Peter sprayed a bunch of spicy chili oil on his face. Motherfucker, you play dirty, Octopus screamed. He was so spicy that he couldn't open his eyes to block Peter's attack. He was beaten like a punching bag by him. Finally, Peter twisted his head 180 degrees to the back. Octopus fell limp to the ground. Peter quietly left, but he wasn't dead. In his head, he started to think, although he had fought with countless opponents over the years, he had never met someone as proficient as Peter at that age. Of course, he didn't know that he was Peter who had rejuvenated. He remembered when he was at the orphanage, he was taught to have a special skill to deal with strong opponents, which was to take down the target when they were distracted. At that time, Octopus had created a special skill that only he could use, which was to turn himself into an octopus skewer and wrap around the opponent until they died. But he was also taught to be careful, not to turn his back when he thought he had one. After months of hard training, the octopus was confident that he would not lose to anyone, as long as he still had that special skill. Now was the time for him to use it. Taking advantage of Peter's complacency thinking he had won, he used super fast speed to wrap tightly around Peter, then squeezed and broke his bones until he was deformed. I've been doing this job since you were born, you little brat. My experience is different from those newbies like you. Ha ha ha, the octopus laughed happily, squeezing his whole body. It had been a long time since he felt such a thrill of fighting. How long has it been? Peter's voice echoed, bringing him back to reality. The octopus was dumbfounded. If he was there, then who was the dead subordinate in his hand? It turned out he didn't notice because his eyes couldn't see clearly. With the sense of a long-time assassin, the octopus felt that he would die at the hands of Peter, who was even stronger than the 12 apostles. Wait, stop for about 2 seconds. The octopus hurried. He grabbed Leona to negotiate. She immediately protested. Shut up, I'm negotiating. He covered her mouth. Peter agreed. The deal was successful. The octopus quickly ran out the door. Take that girl away. I'll pretend nothing happened. But in his head he had planned to chop Peter up into pieces. If you turn your back when you think you've won, you'll lose your head, Peter said. The octopus knew that was a lesson learned in the orphanage, connected to the detail that Peter admitted his identity. He was stunned. No way, it couldn't be like that. So the person standing in front of him now was really Peter. But who knew Peter was still alive? So now was the real end. Peter broke each bone on his body. His body was deformed even more than when he used his special skill. He died instantly. That night, on the rooftop of a luxurious building, someone was reporting the death of the octopus to his tattooed boss. The surveillance camera in the store was removed. No clues could be found. This was truly a strange thing. An old man who was standing in front of the death door was shot, but came back after only a day and killed 3 professional assassins without leaving any traces. A reward of $7.6 billion, an SSS-level mission was announced to all the assassins of glory. From now on they were allowed to hunt Peter, he ordered. From then on all the pages of the Glory Club was a picture of Peter at 60 years old with a very warm and humane message, but only Peter knew that this was their way of communicating. Peter crushed the poster they sent in his hand. He didn't need to go looking for him, because sooner or later he would come to wipe them out. No money, no house, no car. Now to avenge Peter needed help. In his head he immediately thought of that person, but that person was a bit strange. He went to an abandoned public bathhouse. Inside were homeless people lying crowded. Peter went to the bulletin board, found the brick in the middle of selling organs and prostitution. As soon as he pressed it, a secret passage opened. A staircase led to a luxurious space that made Peter also amazed. Who would have thought that such a VIP place would be hidden under the public bathhouse of the homeless? The whole room smelled of polymer, proving that the owner of them was not a simple one. Suddenly a sharp object touched Peter's neck. He calmly said, "Whether it's silk clothes or jade plates, they don't matter to you, do they? Because you're blind." The owner of the room was a blind girl with a guard dog. She frowned. It seemed that today she had to go dump another body. Through the nose that was sharper than her pet's, she knew that Peter was young, had no smell of alcohol. He was not a beggar around here either, maybe a thief, but why didn't he have any anxiety, but a murderous aura? After calculating for a while, she concluded that Peter was sent by the Glory Group, so she had to leave his corpse here. Even though she was blind, she wielded a stick as a weapon skillfully, but she couldn't hit Peter with any move. "You run like a mouse," she said after cornering Peter to the wall, eagerly throwing the sharp stick at him like playing darts. Peter dodged and made her tear the expensive wallpaper of hers. Peter tilted his head, not understanding why she was so strong. At that moment, she jumped at him. "Have you never seen a blind person before?" To prove it, Peter circled around to the front, knocked her down to the ground in her astonishment. "What a surprise! I didn't expect Glory to have a guy as good as you." As she spoke, she pointed a knife that she had pulled out from somewhere at Peter's face, but she couldn't feel his killing intent. Maybe you don't want to kill a disabled person. However, this battle was 2 against 1, not solo. She signaled to her dog Alexander McCain. It rushed up and opened its mouth wide with its sharp teeth. But a second later, it lay down obediently under Peter's caress, making her stop. Finally, the two sat down and chatted. 30 minutes had passed, but she still couldn't believe it and touched Peter's face. His skin was soft and smooth, the old man's smell was gone. No wonder she didn't recognize him. Both the dog and the owner rolled on the floor, making Peter confused. She asked excitedly, "Did you die like this? Tell me quickly, I also want to try." The death pose, the cause of death of Peter. She wanted to know everything to rejuvenate. Obviously, the answer she got was a few lumps on his forehead. The main character's secret couldn't be revealed. Now to the main point, Peter would fight Glory alone by infiltrating the Eye of the Storm. They wanted to catch him, so he would control and disrupt them in his palm. In other words, he would become an assassin in Glory. It sounded ridiculous, but now Peter had become young again, so no one recognized him. If Peter became an assassin of them, they would plan to catch Peter while he was in their palm. This cunning plan was indeed only thought of by old Peter. That's why they say the older the ginger, the spicier. However, to become an assassin of Glory, he had to come from their orphanage, although Peter had come from there when he was old, but now he was an outsider. Wrong, there is a way. Peter smirked. He had thought of everything. The next morning at New Glory High School, the female students were putting on makeup like brides when a new transfer student arrived. No one else but Peter. This was the second way to become an assassin of them. Peter took the name Kim Sung-gu. As soon as he entered the school, he knocked down the hearts of the hot girls. New Glory School was a private school established by Glory. From the outside, it looked like a normal school, but its purpose was to train assassins in a secret killer class. The final way to become an assassin of Glory was to enter the killer class. While everyone was gathering in the auditorium to award the ballet prize for the girls, Peter would make them pay attention to him. Peter walked up to the podium and spoke into the microphone. "My name is Kim Sung-gu and today I just transferred here. My hobby is fighting, my specialty is also fighting, and I am an assassin." This announcement shocked both the insiders and the outsiders. And indeed, he had attracted their attention. He would make them let him into the killer class. "Everyone, cheer for me." Peter's NGO moment was captured by every camera there. A fat guy dressed like a street boy led his gang to approach Peter. His smell had come to surrender. "Hey, killer, you seduced Yejin, right?" he asked Peter, but he didn't understand what he was asking. This dog, the fat guy with tears in his eyes, sobbed when he stood in front of the person he considered a third party. Yang Yi-sol. He only paid attention to one girl, that was his ex-girlfriend for 22 days. Oh Yejin, Yi-sol's ideal lover. But today, he lost his girlfriend to Peter. So he had to take revenge. Yi-sol confidently knocked down Mapo-gu with a punch. And Peter, who could just swing his arm and make him hurt. The force of the punch made his hair fly up, revealing the airport on his forehead, but that was it. And Peter hit him on the forehead, making Yi-sol dizzy, but his legs were limp and fell in front of Peter. "Hey, the school is in order. What are you doing?" The teacher showed Peter a red card, pinched his cheek and dragged him to the principal's office for tea. The killer students started to pay attention to Peter, and sent someone to find out his family background. The scene of Peter being dragged away, but his handsome face was still crazy, attracting everyone's eyes here, especially Leona. Lunch break, Yona Orunbile was sitting chill on the stone bench when suddenly Peter sat down next to her, making her jump. He looked at the pile of food on Yona's tray, not expecting the girl to have such a huge appetite. Remembering that time Peter didn't take Yona's life, he needed her to live to be a witness, confessing that the octopus killer was the old man in this picture. Yona kept her promise, but why did Peter still come here to find her? Not Yona glared at him because of Peter. Now the company is monitoring her so hard that going to the bathroom is also miserable. Peter tilted his head. Thanks to him saving her, she could sit here and eat. Save what? It's because I found a way to survive. Yona countered him. He didn't know how scary this place was and didn't know who she really was, an outsider. What was he doing here? I have you to help me, Peter said, but Yona would never help him in his dreams. We're in the same boat, Unbile. No, Leona is right. Peter's words made Yona stop, because that was her real name. But when she turned around, Peter had left. He was a mysterious wolf. This is Jonathan, nicknamed Usain Bolt of New Glory School, setting a record for running 400 in high school. But it seems that today his retirement has been decided, because a person has appeared who runs 400 like running 4 his face doesn't change either. No one else but Peter Esol comforted Jonathan not to be sad because being sad doesn't make him the main character either. Next is the eye test. Peter Doak got up to 6.0, he had to call it sharper than the owl's eye. Now it's the fruit carving class. Peter seriously wore an apron, using a knife was his forte. Peter intended to try a little but accidentally made a rabbit from an apple. He was the main character who wanted to live normally but it was hard. At this time, at a corner of the school, the gangsters were bullying the janitor, and also filming to post on YouTube Short. Hey, you guys have violated the school rules, the pants rules. One guy punched the teacher, making him unable to speak. It's the students who don't care about their father, so they bully a weak teacher. Just then, Peter went to dump the trash, holding the trash can but looking at him like he was carrying a Gucci bag on the red carpet. Do you guys want to beat the teacher too? Peter asked. They looked up to talk to him, but still arrogantly chased him away. What if I don't go? He said. He spat on him, provoking him, then get my saliva, ahihi. This outfit is hard for me to extort. Peter was angry. The student swung his fist, but not a single hair of Peter touched. He tried to punch again, but 10 punches all slipped, making his friends feel ashamed. Peter didn't bother with him anymore, kicked his leg, making him fall face down. The one behind him held a brick and hit him stealthily, but this time he touched Peter, who took the initiative to smash the brick in his hand. The 3 brats stood up and said in unison, "We're sorry, sir, before the crime, justice always wins." Peter was satisfied and let them go, then asked about the teacher's situation, who was still trembling but scolded him for fighting in front of the teacher. Peter didn't care. He picked up the phone they were so scared they left behind, and deleted the data of the teacher's video. Student Sungu, what are you doing? As soon as he finished speaking, the teacher jumped up and kicked silently towards Peter. He used one arm to block the attack, and the teacher laughed excitedly. Indeed, my eyes are not wrong. The evidence was the milk coffee in his hand, dodging the blow without spilling a drop. He only revealed his true face now, asking Peter what his real purpose was when he came here. Because I want revenge. Peter gritted his teeth. Glory took away my life, my house, my money, my reputation, everything. Of course, Peter was not foolish enough to tell the name of the enemy to him. After hearing Peter's story, he made an offer. Do you want to join my serving ministry? Peter smirked. He had been waiting for this day to meet them. The teacher had always secretly followed him. He was the assassin instructor of Glory. New Glory School had a place to train assassins hidden under the serving ministry department. Only the best were chosen to enter, and Peter was an exception as he had been noticed as soon as he entered the school. The door opened, making Peter astonished. The place to train assassins looked like a nursery, which was also right because he was 60 years old. The instructor signaled everyone to pay attention, announcing Peter's debut. Yona was startled. Why did she meet him everywhere? Their eyes met, and she silently told him not to let them know they knew each other. The next second, Peter blinked and then calmly turned away, making Yona horrified. Was this a sign of preparing to kill people and silence them? I'm Kim Sungu. Thank you for welcoming me. Peter introduced himself. Welcome what? 2 big guys stepped up, looking like bad elements. One was Dok Go Hyun, one was Dok Go Jae. They both came from the Glory Orphanage, Batch 58, and discriminated against those who did not come from the orphanage but could enter the serving ministry. Peter also came from that damn orphanage. The instructor signaled them to have a welcome party for the new member. They looked at each other and thought of cake, but it was human meat cake. Looking at this, Peter felt that this was the assassin class. Get out of the way, let us welcome him first. The Dok brothers stepped up. Yona hurriedly intervened and told them not to rush, or they would get a ticket to visit hell. Dok Jr. pushed her away, and went to flex his muscles in front of Peter. Let's go outside and fight a bit. Peter was calm. He hadn't had a welcome party for a long time, so he felt nostalgic. The Dok brothers rushed up with knives. Dok Jr. was slapped on the back by Peter. Dok Sr. was blocked. Dok Sr. hated those who did nothing but got into the serving ministry. They study here to become strong and become a super assassin like him. He is Peter, the disciple they admire. If they knew they were facing the real Peter, they would probably shiver like in the middle of winter. The two sides fought for a while and then separated. Peter dusted his butt and laughed. They talked nonsense while fighting. The Dok Go brothers were amazed. They couldn't believe they were pushed out at the same time. They couldn't bear this humiliation and rushed up. They had suffered so much for 18 years to get here. A kid from nowhere came and got priority like Peter. It made them itch. Peter had been through 60 years, not a little. After a while of struggling, the Dok brothers sweated all over. Everyone raised their thumbs to praise them. They were awesome. The new kid couldn't do anything to them. Meanwhile, Peter left. Only Yona followed him. She had seen through the world. Peter's fist clearly had no strength. Peter pretended to be ignorant. Who knows anything? Yona was still determined. The Dok brothers were sloppy, but Peter didn't sweat a drop. Why did you do that? Yona pushed Peter against the wall and greeted him. You came here to study, which was suspicious enough, but why didn't you show your full potential? There must be a dark plot. Peter was silent and slid down to escape Yona's arm. He walked away. Sorry, I'm going to eat, but it's midnight now. That night, the owner of the car rental shop was happily dancing after a bumper day. It was midnight and there were still people renting cars. But he was puzzled. Didn't the whole group just rent a 40-seat bus? But only one person came to rent it. The office worker went alone, but carried a bunch of suitcases. The owner didn't understand why there was so much luggage, but he was happy to help him load it. But he brushed off the owner. Do you want to bet? See what's in the suitcase? That night, he drove with a bewildered mind. He didn't bet, but he was sure he didn't see it wrong. Clearly, the suitcase had moved. At the meeting, the teacher announced a commission from the chairman of DA Group, Choyun Chang, one of their main sponsors. Especially, the team that succeeds in this commission will be nominated by the chairman and immediately receive a certificate of service, meaning they will be certified as an assassin. The content of the commission is to take back his son. Recently, there have been many kidnappings of young men around 10 years old, including the son of Chairman Choi. Calling the police would be faster, but Chairman Choi wanted revenge. They just needed to find his son. Then they would be supported if the opponent was too many. Everyone was buzzing. If successful, it would save 2 years of studying here. But the task was probably not easy. While they were hesitating, the Dok brothers raised their hands. But besides them, Peter, who always hunted for this opportunity, couldn't be missed. Yona also raised her hand. She glanced at him. They were ready to go, but the teacher first took them to a place. Peter was determined. The opportunity had come. This was the first step for his revenge. But why were they at the entertainment center? The samba dancers were hot and eye-catching. Among them were the Dok brothers. Although they both wondered why they wore bikinis to the park, their eyes couldn't leave the girls. Meanwhile, the girls also asked for Peter's top ID. Only Yona remembered why they came here. According to the teacher, this was where the son of Chairman Choi was kidnapped. They had to find the boy and knock out the kidnapper. The last place he saw the boy was the Blue World, but now he didn't know if he was alive or not. In this vast amusement park, where could he find a clue? But Yona didn't understand why Peter always looked calm as if he knew everything. He wanted to check every corner first. However, to play some games they had to book in advance. The two brothers of Dok were annoyed when they got there and still couldn't get in. Everyone looked at them and knew they were from the countryside, the first time they went to an amusement park, while Yona had downloaded the registration app. You came here to play, Leona, you really have no talent, Dok mocked her. But the two brothers were the ones who enjoyed the games the most, from carousel to bumper cars. They played their hearts out and forgot their mission. The two Peters went to the shooting booth. The owner smiled wickedly because he had placed very heavy things under the dolls, so no one could shoot them down. Yona picked up the fake gun and examined it. She had always used real ones. She never touched them. After 5 minutes, they happily carried all the huge go from his stall and left before the man's stunned eyes. Don't mess with the assassins. Seeing Peter standing like a plant, the two brothers of Doak called him. It seemed that everyone was excited because this was their first time to an amusement park. They also went through childhood like him, not knowing whether they would live or die tomorrow, let alone go out and play. Peter let them enjoy a little more, because they didn't know when they could laugh like this. After a while of playing bored, Leona separated from them. Blind knew she came to eat but was dragged to play. Oh, forget today to do the mission. While surfing the web, Yona's phone suddenly received a Bluetooth connection from Choi Eun-jail's headset, the son of Chairman Choi. If she caught the signal, it meant that the kidnappers were nearby. Yona groped for the location. Where she stopped was the women's restroom. Could anyone have picked up the boy's headphones? But it could also be the same name but different person. Yona hesitated, finally still stepped in to check. There was only one girl standing in front of the mirror very normally. Seeing the AirPods in her hand, Yona took a breath, tried to smile friendly and started a conversation. Excuse me, but where did you get that AirPods from? Yona's friendly smile made the girl scream. Her boyfriend rushed in. That crazy one suddenly appeared from behind and wanted to hit me. It wanted to steal my stuff. He immediately approached Yona. This girl was pretending to be pretty and stealing. Yona hadn't had time to explain when he had already moved his hands and feet without knowing he was about to get beaten. Outside, the three were looking for Yona's whereabouts. They guessed she had sneaked away to eat a piece. But Peter was sure she wouldn't be bullied. Maybe she even bullied others. Meanwhile, a fight between a weakling and a giant in the women's restroom was going on. Yona gently jumped out from behind and wrapped around the fat guy, making him breathe hard. She used a lollipop stick to stab his head but then stopped. The assassin habit made Yona sometimes kill mercilessly. This case didn't need to use force, so Yona just asked questions. The most important thing was this girl. Outside, everyone was waiting for Yona. She ran over with the AirPods of Chairman Choi's son in her hand, the last place she saw also found. Anyway, it seems we are looking at the same place, Peter said. Just use your brain a little and you can guess. The way to disappear naturally, no matter where you go or how many eyes look at you, the place that is least noticed even if someone screams, is the haunted house. Moreover, on this app game, the place was booked all day. No one came in or out. Both Peter and Yona pointed to the haunted house where Chairman Choi's son last appeared. They all walked in. The Doak brothers looked dangerous. They had enough fun. Now they didn't know what would happen, so follow us. Meanwhile, Dokkan was holding Yona's shirt tightly, pretending to take care of the back, but actually he was afraid of ghosts jumping out. Peter went ahead, but he soon realized something strange. Even though he had booked the whole place, there was no one here. He signaled for everyone to get ready, because now everything was just beginning. The Doak brothers noticed something strange. Oh damn, was this okay? But for Peter this was already half a success. To find the hostage and the kidnapper, the first thing they had to do was to get kidnapped. So they all jumped into the mist of sleeping gas and slept soundly, waiting for the kidnapper to come and carry them away. Right then, the teacher suddenly panicked and wanted to contact the Peter group, but they were asleep so they didn't answer the phone. All because the teacher knew that the kidnapper was Park Sang-doo, the guy who had been nominated to be an envoy, but Glory couldn't stand it and kicked him out. The staff heard that, but still normal, because their kids had learned what they needed to learn. No, the teacher said. His face suddenly turned pale. He was definitely not an easy guy to deal with. Meanwhile, the Peter group had been taken to a place with dozens of suitcases containing children. Park Sang-doo wore an apron. The letter used was chloroform, a type of anesthetic in movies. Normal people when fainting will open their mouths when sleeping, but Yona didn't make him start to doubt. Park Sang-doo, a cruel man, had taken one leg of the teacher. Now it was not time to do the mission anymore. He had to go and save them. Because of Park Sang-doo's perverted hobby of cutting off other people's legs, he went from a two-legged assassin to a 1.5-legged one. Yona often opened her eyes. Did he find out? Just as Park Sang-doo was about to act, Yona's phone rang. He picked it up. On the other end of the line, the teacher gritted his teeth. Park Sang-doo, if you touch a hair of those kids, I will risk my life to kill you. Long time no see, Senior Kwang Q, but why did you say such scary words? Are you afraid I will make them disabled like you? This word of Sang-doo made the teacher furious. He had to deal with him. By the way, let's make a bet. Sang-doo likes gambling the most. This time he bets with the officer to see how many legs the kids have left when he gets here. If the officer is right, he will spare Choi Eun-chang's life, otherwise he will have nothing. It has been a long time since the officer became trembling when facing such an enemy, because he is his nightmare, especially when he mentions gambling. Meanwhile, the two brothers Dok-go are looking for Sang-do. Where is this criminal dog hiding? Hurry up and go over there. Leona and Kim Sung-gu are very weak, so they will be the first targets. As Sang-do left, Yona looked at Peter with a judgmental look. Because he was sleeping with his mouth open, he was not really unconscious. Besides, there was only one way to wake him up. Yona took off her socks, freed her smelly feet, and just as she brought them to Peter's nose, he opened his eyes. What are you doing? Yona was startled. Who would have thought that he had been awake from the beginning? Yona quickly retracted her feet. Don't misunderstand. I just meant to wake you up, with that smell, by pinching your nose. Yona showed Peter how to untie his hands, learned in the organization, rubbing until the rope loosened. Peter raised his free hands in confusion. Yona was surprised. Damn, when did you get out? From the beginning, right? Peter had untied himself because he was afraid that Park Sang-do would attack. Yona quickly shared her knowledge with him, that Park Sang-do belonged to Glory. This was not a normal kidnapping. You know that, right? Peter said. Then he asked her if she liked gambling, because this was a gamble between them. At that time, the Dok brothers were facing Sang-do. It seemed that they didn't know his identity. The young students were really rude, but he explained. Let's bet hard, he said. The brothers looked at each other and agreed. The condition was that if they won, he would do whatever they wanted. The teacher on the bus heard their conversation and got angry, because once they accepted the bet with him, they had to leave a leg. Damn, I thought he was a normal office worker, but he was sexier than expected. But from tomorrow, you will have to sit in a wheelchair. The Dok brothers tore their shirts and flexed their muscles. Sang-do threw them a knife, claiming that the bet had to be fair. Dok brother didn't wait and rushed in. Besides his speed, he also had the skill of fighting with a knife. After a few rounds of knife fighting, Dok brother saw that he was nothing special, the same kind of knife, but he moved slower. If they fought for a long time, he would surely win. But the longer it went, the weirder it got. Clearly the same knife, but Dok brother couldn't scratch him. Dok brother asked what was going on. It turned out that the bastard Sang-do had thrown them a knife without a blade. Just then, Peter and Yona ran over, intending to help, but Dok brother raised his hand to stop them. Don't interfere. Because this is our battle. If we don't win, you won't win either. The two could only stand still and watch the Dok brothers compete with him. He didn't know how big their motivation was. The final door to complete the orphanage was called the Hell Month, a month in a place with no water and food. All they had was a gun and a bullet. The forest full of wild animals was the survival challenge of the children. The bullet was used to hunt, also to betray friends, even to end their own lives. The brothers became competitive. Compared to dying like that, they had to live by any means. They saved the bullet until the end because they had a hunch that bullet would decide their fate. After the Hell Month ended, the brothers only knew that in their class 58, the only ones who survived among 181 children were the two Dok brothers. They even heard a more shocking story, that their idol Peter had left a unique record in 58 years. He was the only one who didn't use the bullet. The brothers had spent 10 years trying to be like Peter, so Sang-do was just a stepping stone for them to climb up. Dok brother locked Sang-do's leg, while Dok brother rushed from behind to prepare for the final stage. Sang-do smirked. He didn't want to chop his leg anymore, but instead took an arm of Dok brother. Because the knife had no blade, it couldn't cut, but if it didn't cut, he would stab until he died. Dok brother had picked up the knife from somewhere and aimed at him. Wanna be Peter, huh, dream on, he mocked while smashing the knife. What he held was not a normal knife but a kukri from Nepal, with a weight and mass 3 times that of a normal knife. He had practiced this all his life, a weapon faster than a knife and heavier than an axe. This was his killing weapon. Don't talk nonsense. The Dok brothers rushed in, even though they started to panic. Holding that heavy knife and moving normally, he was not a normal office worker. In the past, Park Sang-do was an A-level assassin of Glory. With just one jump, he slashed the joints of the two leopards. Before fainting, the two brothers did not forget to tell Peter and Yona to run while they still had 2 legs. Yona screamed in panic. Sang-do smiled friendly. Don't worry, they are not dead yet. Fighting with the kids, but then I bet, so I have to take 2 legs, right? Before the moment the two brothers of Dok were about to be crippled, the teacher shouted, Don't touch the kids, Sang-do, please. I will give you my remaining leg. Yona was flustered and didn't know what to do. Peter stepped forward. If you want, both hands and feet. Sure enough, this sentence caught Sang-do's attention. He agreed to bet and threw him a knife without a blade. Yona was unhappy, who didn't know that knife was useless. But Peter didn't need a knife, he just needed something beautiful. Oops, a metal tray like this is enough. Sang-do laughed. Ah, very interesting, you are ready. But this kid, I won't spare the kids. He rushed up at the speed of the altar even though he was holding a knife heavier than an axe. Seeing Peter holding the tray to block, he thought he used it as a shield, but the tray probably couldn't stand the blow of the cookery knife even once. Seeing no sound or scream, the teacher didn't know what was going on, but he couldn't let things happen like that day, the day he lost everything to Sang-do. In a casino, the dealer was sweating and trembling. In front of her was Park Sang-do with the familiar sentence, "Do you want to bet? Bet whether he will live or die because now he has to fight alone with 5 assassins from Glory." The teacher in his youth was the leader of the group to deal with him along with the other 4 people. Their team was veteran assassins of rank B or higher. No matter how strong Park Sang-do was, facing them was too much. That was the teacher's thought, but what he witnessed was the scene of him dancing with his knife, feeling like he had surpassed human. And it was also that day that he lost one of his legs, and also lost his status as an assassin. Saw or knife doesn't matter, what matters is how to use it, and he is a dangerous killer. A chop from his cookery knife will split the metal tray in Peter's hand, feeling like he can cut his body in half. He smirked, "You're lucky, but what now? The only shield is split in half." Yona pulled out a dagger ready to sneak up and attack, but Peter didn't seem to need it. The cookery knife is not a type of weapon that is used sharp, so he was also very surprised, but his purpose was not to use the tray as a shield. Peter clenched his hand to avoid accidentally dropping his new weapon because he could use anything as a weapon. Park Sang-do coughed because he guessed wrong about his purpose. He began to panic because just now he tried to chop hard enough to split his body. But in a short moment of just a few ticks, Peter backed away. He was still alive and the tray deliberately split in half. He couldn't believe he was a student. "I don't know where you learned the skill, but it doesn't work on me." Sang-do took off his shirt, deliberately throwing it in front of Peter. He wanted to take the opportunity to blind him to test his ability. Was it intentional or accidental? Sang-do got momentum and kept chopping while Peter stood still. He smirked, sure this time he cut him. But suddenly Peter appeared behind him, the weapon ready to slash the empty neck of Sang-do. He clearly felt the cut already, but why did a cushion appear? First of all, he had to dodge. Sang-do backed away while covering his neck with his hand. In an instant, Peter did not hesitate to cut his throat. If he did not cover it, he would have torn the artery. "Are you really a student?" He doubted Peter. Suddenly he had a thought in his head. Peter could not cut thick clothes with a tray knife, nor could he block his knife, so he aimed at the exposed neck. Peter rushed up with a speed that he could not keep up. He was pushed back. He was sure he was not a student, maybe not even a human. Yona witnessed the red speed between the two. The cookery knife was so powerful that every swing was like an explosion. If hit, it would surely die. But also because of the weight of the knife, Sang-do was much slower than Peter. If he continued, he might win. But suddenly a wound appeared on Peter's perfect face. Yona covered her mouth in astonishment. "Since when?" "When catching cows, you have to use a cow-catching knife, but with mice, you have to use a mouse-catching knife," Sang-do said while pulling out 2 maces from the cookery knife, which had hit Peter's cheek. The cookery knife was much heavier than a normal knife. If he threw it away, it would only be to increase the speed. Sang-do swung up but with a completely different speed, as if he had been updated to a new version, much faster. But Yona didn't understand. Why did he use the mace that was used to stab like using a knife? Sang-do kept swinging back and forth, finally stabbing, but his arm suddenly stopped in mid-air. He couldn't even hold the knife anymore. In his head at this time there were only 3 words impossible. Until now he realized Peter's intention, not to cut his throat, but from the beginning he aimed at his arm. Muscles, extensors, vocal cords, median nerve, hip nerve, spinal nerve, they are all necessary for the arm to hold objects and Peter had cut them all off of Sang-do. From the beginning he had no intention of killing him. Sang-do trembled. In front of him now was not a student, but a bloodthirsty lord of the forest. How many people had he hunted? Peter wrapped the silver tray tightly as a glove. A silver tray could not beat a steel knife. But just wait until the end, he will understand how to break a rock with an egg. Sang-do's past was not very happy. He was hung upside down on a tree and drank that water by the bullies. Gradually, his childhood memories were the days of imagining killing the bastard who bullied him, but he had no courage to resist. Until one day, an event awakened the demon inside Sang-do. He would rather die than live. "Do you want to gamble to the extreme?" That was the sentence that made Sang-jo's heart beat faster. He didn't know why, but he felt a strong passion for betting his life, and that made him stronger. Just like dopamine or serotonin, Pleasure and power came to him every time he risked his life. Gambling was his drug and he always won those bets. He felt he was the strongest, but now the strongest one was deforming his face under Peter's punch. He threw away his silver tray gloves and rushed up with his bare hands and murderous aura. Don't come any closer, you bastard, Park Sang-doo screamed. He held up a grenade and threatened him. If he took another step, he would blow up the children in the suitcase. Yona couldn't believe how crazy he was, but if he detonated it, everyone would die. Do you see the gas line on the ceiling? If this explodes, everyone will die. If you don't want to die, kneel down, he shouted. Do it, Peter said. In an instant, he rushed to shove a grenade into his mouth and pulled the pin. Now he could only clench his mouth to prevent the grenade from exploding. This is how you threaten, Peter taught him. You are young and dare to mess with a 60-year-old man? He punched Park Sang-doo's ribs repeatedly, then punched his back, but he absolutely didn't dare to scream for fear of the boom. Finally, a punch straight to the face made him cry silently. His mouth still clenched the grenade and didn't dare to open it even 1 millimeter. Peter put the pin back in, ordered him to get up quickly and continue. He was not satisfied yet. I didn't mean to do this. He hurriedly got up. This dialogue, surely that Sang-doo guy had another plan. Yona rushed to catch him. Who knew Sang-doo knelt down and begged Peter with tears. Brother, let's make peace. Uncle will pretend nothing happened. Uncle will also let the kids go. Right then, the teacher rushed in panic. Kids, I'm here. But he had to freeze for 3 seconds before the scene. Park Sang-doo, his nightmare, now hugged his leg and begged for help. Peter took the Doak brothers with him, and the case ended. The son of Chairman Choi also escaped safely. As for Park Sang-doo, he was stuffed into a sleeping bag, his mouth still begging for peace with Peter. Finally he was taken to the headquarters of Glory. The nightmare ended the assassin's life of the teacher. Today he was dealt with, but he still couldn't believe that the kids could handle him easily. Just now he clearly felt the situation, although there were some places that were not very clear, but the teacher had nothing to say. As promised, they officially became assassins, but it didn't seem as expected. The Doak brothers couldn't believe they caught an S-level assassin but only got promoted to D-level. It was unfair. Forget about that. Today Chairman Choi called them. Where's this going? We're not going to die, are we? The elevator opened, and in front of them were 2 muscular receptionist sisters. Doak pressed the elevator. Wrong place. Hurry up and close the door. Uncle or brother, we're sorry. Please come in, we're waiting. A beautiful girl stepped out from behind. Doak pressed the elevator to stop. Hurry up and open it. It's an ally. They were taken to be treated for saving the chairman's son. First was a free buffet, then wearing a high-end vest, having food and clothes, so even if they didn't meet the chairman, there was no problem. Finally, the most spectacular item, the main dish of today, was weapons. They were dazzled when standing in the weapons warehouse of Daha Group, a military company with the world's leading technology, responsible for supporting combat of all kinds of glory assassins. To repay them, Chairman Choi said to take as much as they wanted. Hey, we don't use guns to fight, right? Of course, brother, the Doak brothers said before stuffing a bunch of guns into their bodies. Wherever there was resistance, they had to stuff more. This way they had to send express delivery. Yona only liked using knives, a Damascus with S30V material, expensive stuff that only once in a lifetime, so she also wanted to take one. But Yona hesitated because she didn't do anything that day. Oh, what to do? Finally, it was Peter. The girl was also curious what he would choose. Who knew he only took a fountain pen? She thought he was young and not greedy. But in fact, he had used all the weapons here. Suddenly the girl received an order, take Peter to the chairman's room. They went up to the PH floor. He was curious about what the chairman wanted to see him for, but the girl said if he wanted to know, he had to go and ask. After leading him there, she left, and only Peter and the chairman were left in the room. I've wanted to meet you once. The chairman spoke and invited him to sit down, a man who exuded the charisma of a chairman of the world's leading military corporation. He asked him about his meal, clothes, everything was fine with him, but there must be a reason why he called him up here alone. Ah, didn't I say it? I wanted to see you, there's no other reason, so you don't need to be so rigid. But anyway, I have to remind you, the chairman moved closer and faced Peter. Student Kim Sung-gu, I know who you are. In the winter of 1978 at Namsan, the kidnapper Choi Eun-chang was being interrogated harshly, but he kept his mouth shut. He smirked and said, you guys only have one way to save him, hand over the missile that South Korea developed with the US to the Soviet Union. Of course, if you refuse, Choi Eun-krang will die in the haunted house. Choi Dae-ha just needed to find his son back. He requested to send the most elite force including Delta to Moscow. However, as soon as they received an urgent message, the Delta force was wiped out. In the end, there was only one way. Dae-ha went to the Glory Church, knocked on the door and called the priest. He agreed to support the church even for 100 years, as long as he sent the strongest envoy among their 12 people to rescue his son. I don't know what you're talking about anymore. The priest's words made Dae-ha silent. The priest said he should pray, because the Lord's missile had arrived in Moscow. Dae-ha certainly couldn't be at ease when 3 special forces were all destroyed, but with only Peter, could he do anything? But he was Peter, the one who always fought alone and brought victory, the strongest among the 12 envoys. The guys on the train didn't know how he got into the compartment, but there was only one person, so it must be easy to deal with. Very fitting, Peter said. Then a burst of gunfire in the blink of an eye killed everyone in the compartment. I said very fitting, the number of your heads and my bullets. Peter stepped into the last compartment. The only survivor used Choi Eun-chang as a hostage. He had heard of an Asian who was nicknamed a monster, who could survive anywhere, but Peter was younger than he thought. Peter raised his hands to avoid provoking, spoke to Eun-chang in Korean, signaled him to bow his head when he counted to 3. Choi Eun-chang didn't understand anything. Then Peter counted. At number 3 Peter threw the coin in his hand hard, hitting him right in the forehead, the first time in history someone killed someone with a coin. Choi Eun-chang stuttered and thanked Peter. He smoked a cigarette and patted the boy's head. He came here not to save him but to save the future of Dae-ha Corporation. Eun-chang ran after Peter to leave. In his heart he admired Peter's coolness, the savior of Eun-chang. Even though 40 years had passed, he never forgot his face, so he concluded that he was Peter's nephew.